Call to order. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito will lead the chamber in prayer.
Our gracious God, we are gathered here today as representatives of our people, who with your guidance seek only to serve the Filipinos according to your design, that we may fulfill your holy will. Lord, we pray that you give us the gift of wisdom and open minds, so that despite our diverse opinions, we may listen to and work with each other. May our debates be free and reasoned, and our discussions respectful, so that we may show to the entire nation that our differences are not obstacles to dialogue, unity, and peace. Grant us, O Lord, the strength of character to do what is right for the country. Grant us the courage to stand up for principled ideas of truth, justice, and democracy.
Amen. Secretary, please call the roll.
The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Dilima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, O, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Zuberi, Senate President Pimentel.
With 15 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 46th session, Monday, January 22, 2018, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection to the motion to dispense with the reading of our journal of the 46th session last Monday, January 22, 2018, and consider the same as approved? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, there are guests of Senator Ejercito, students from Mater Dei Academy, Cavite City. Would like to welcome them to the Senate, Mr. President.
Welcome to all of our guests.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
17, bale? 17? Can we, Majority Leader, can we correct the statement earlier? There were 17 senators who answered the roll call. So let the records reflect.
Yes, Mr. President, we concur.
Okay. So any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion is approved. Secretary, reference of business.
Bills on first reading. 1654, an act converting the Bicol Sanitarium in the municipality of Cabusa, province of Camarines Sur, into a geriatric and general medical center to be known as the Bicol Regional Geriatric Medical Center, upgrading its service facilities, authorizing the increase of its medical personnel, and appropriating funds. Therefore, Senator Escudero.
Referred to the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
1655, an act declaring January 23 of every year a special working holiday in the province of Bulacan in commemoration of the inauguration of the Philippine Republic. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy Binay.
To the Committee on Local Government.
1656, an act establishing and institutionalizing the seal of good local governance for local government units and allocating for this purpose the seal of good local governance fund. Senator Sani Angara.
Advice mo. To the Committees on Local Government and Finance.
1657, an act requiring all government and private hospitals, medical centers, clinics, infirmaries, and puriculture centers to give free medical and dental assistance to indigent children. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy Binay.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, and Ways and Means.
1658, an act strengthening gender equality by amending Article 14 of Executive Order Number 209, otherwise known as the Family Code of the Philippines, and for other purposes. Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy Binay.
To the Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
1659, an act enhancing protection for overseas Filipino workers in the custody of government officers, employees, amending for this purpose Republic Act 8042, Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy Binay.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development and Foreign Relations.
1660, an act encouraging all theaters and cinemas in the Philippines to grant free admission or admission at discount rates to members of the Philippine military, Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy Binay.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
Additional referential business, messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House.
Yes, you're good.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 17 January 2018, it adopted Senate Joint Resolution number 8 as amendment to House Joint Resolution number 15 entitled Joint Resolution authorizing the National Housing Authority to award to other qualified beneficiaries the unawarded housing units in the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, Bureau of Fire Protection, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology of Corrections, Bureau of Corrections, housing projects, awarded housing units that are not yet occupied and whose ownership and possession are surrendered by their respective awardees, and housing units whose respective awards were cancelled by reason of default in the payment of amortization or for any violation of the terms and conditions of the individual loan agreement in accordance with existing laws.
To the Archives.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 17 January 2018 it concurred with the Senate amendments to the following House bills. House Bill number 3179 entitled Extending the Deadline for the Compliance of Mindoro State College of Agriculture and Technology with the requirements of the Commission on Higher Education for conversion into a state university. House Bill number 5146 entitled Providing for the Compliance Requirements for the Establishment of the Compostela Valley State College. House Bill number 2737 entitled Extending the Deadline for the Compliance of the Northern Iloilo State University with the requirements of the Commission on Higher Education for conversion into a state university. House Bill number 5148 entitled Renaming the Iloilo State University of Science and Technology as the Iloilo State University of Fisheries Science and Technology, and extending the deadline for compliance of the Iloilo State University of Science and Technology into a state university with the requirements of the Commission on Higher Education. House Bill number 5150 entitled Effecting the Transition into a State University of Surigao State College of Technology, Siargao National College of Science and Technology, and Surigao del Norte College of Agriculture and Technology. House Bill number 5147 entitled Converting the Talisay City College in Talisay, Cebu into a Talisay City State College. House Bill number 5149 entitled Extending the Deadline for Compliance of the Cotabato City State Polytechnic College with the requirements of the Commission on Higher Education for conversion into a state university. House Bill number 5151 entitled Extending the Deadline for the Compliance of the Mountain Province State Polytechnic College with the requirements of the Commission on Higher Education for its conversion into a state university.
To the Archives.
Bills on first reading. 1661, an act providing for the basic law for the Bangsamoro and abolishing the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, repealing for the purpose Republic Act number 9054 entitled An Act to Strengthen and Expand the Organic Act for the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, and Republic Act number 6734, entitled An Act Providing for an Organic Act for the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao and for other purposes. Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committees on Local Government, Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes, Ways and Means and Finance.
1663, an act establishing a medical scholarship and return service program for deserving students and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Education, Arts and Culture, and Finance.
1664, an act declaring January 23 of every year a special working holiday in the entire country to commemorate the declaration of the First Philippine Republic. Senator Richard J. Gordon.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
Committee reports. Committee report number 232, submitted jointly by the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and Justice and Human Rights on the privileged speech of Senator Juan Miguel Zuberi on the death of Horacio Atio Castillo III due to hissing delivered on September 20, 2017, proposed Senate Resolution number 504 and proposed Senate Resolution number 510, recommending the adoption of this report and the implementation of its recommendations. Senator Lacson.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 233, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Justice and Human Rights, and Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes on Senate Bill number 1662 with Senators Honasan II, Gatchalian, Soto III, Ligarda, Zuberi, Aquino IV, and Lacson as authors thereof, entitled An Act amending Republic Act number 8049 to strengthen the law on hazing and regulate other forms of initiation rights of fraternities, sororities, and other organizations, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Bill numbers 27, 199, 223, 1161, 1591, and 1609. Senator Lacson.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to speak on a matter of public interest, move that we recognize Senator Richard Gordon.
Senator Gordon is recognized to speak on a matter of public interest.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody, my fellow senators. Today, we celebrate the promulgation of the Philippine Constitution under President Aguinaldo. Now, Mr. President, I'm delivering this privileged speech knowing that my good friend Senator Escudero already is about to report out the bill, but if only to remind the people of this country that this is an important day in constitutional development. I thought we should deliver something on this day. Mr. President, on June 12, 1898, Philippine independence was formally proclaimed in Cavite. Sometimes, Mr. President, Senator Lacson and I both have our roots in Cavite. We'd like to think that the revolutionary capital of the Philippines would be Cavite. But on the other hand, the constitutional capital of the Philippines would really be Bulacan, because that's where we developed the Constitution. As we all know, 6 days after the proclamation of independence, pagkatapos po noon, ay nag-issue po ng proclamation formalizing the creation of a dictatorial government responsible for assessing the needs of the country. We were in revolution, so in effect, para na rin revolutionary government ang ginagawa ng mga ninuno natin. Proclamation also created a revolutionary Congress to draft a constitution for the government. On 15 September 1898, the Revolutionary Congress was convened in Malolos, Bulacan. The Congress was composed of both appointed and elected delegates, shades of some of the proposals under current events right now, Mr. President. One of its first actions was to ratify the 12 June 1898 Proclamation of Independence, Mr. President. The Malolos Congress approved the draft Constitution on 29 November 1898. It was returned by President Emilio Aguinaldo on 1 December 1898 for amendments which were refused. President Aguinaldo approved the draft Constitution on 23 December 1898. It was formally adopted by the Malolos Congress on 20 January 1899 and promulgated by President Emilio Aguinaldo on 21 January 1899. On the 23rd of January 1899, the First Philippine Republic was proclaimed and inaugurated at the Barasoin Church in Malolos, Bulacan. In ceremonies marked by the article-by-article reading of the whole Constitution by the Secretary of Congress, Pablo Ocampo, followed by the proclamation of Emilio Aguinaldo as the elected President of the First Philippine Republic, and of course, the usual speeches by Aguinaldo and Pedro Paterno. In his proclamation of the Constitutional Republic of the Philippines on 23 January 1899, President Emilio Aguinaldo famously said, and I quote, "Great is this day, glorious this date, and forever memorable, this moment in which our beloved people are raised to the apotheosis of independence." The First Philippine Republic put the Philippines, then a nation fresh from both the Philippine Revolution against Spain and the Spanish-American War between Spain and the United States, into the world map by distinguishing the Philippines as the first independent republic in Asia. This day marked the watershed in terms of governance in Asia, a signal to all the nations in Asia that colonialism was at its death throes. The First Philippine Republic endured until the capture of President Emilio Aguinaldo by the American forces on 23 March 1901 in Palanan, Isabela. When he took the oath of allegiance to the United States 9 days later, the First Philippine Republic came to an end. Mr. President, I didn't want to say that, but I had to, principally because it shows that there is much to do about our maturity as a people. We cannot wilt under pressure, and this is not a criticism, but we should try to be steadfast in, as our forebears did in the Malolos Congress and the Malolos Constitution, and before that, the revolutionary struggle. We should try and be steadfast in our principles, in our beliefs that we must remain an independent people, free to do as it pleases for the benefit of our country. January 23 is significant today, as it was then for proving to the world that the Filipinos are capable of self-rule and self-determination. Even after more than 300 years of colonization by Spain, truly the First Philippine Republic was the beginning of and the foundation upon which to establish the democracy which we so cherish today. It was also the start of the constitutional history of our country. Later on, as you know, we will have the 1935 Constitution, followed by the 1970 Constitution, and the revolutionary government, followed by the 1987 Constitution. And today, there is now debate about Constitution, and it's good to remember that we must adhere to the basic principles of Constitution making, that we cannot be shanghaied or forced to have a constitutional assembly separately in terms of one house thinking that they can do it for the Congress, Mr. President. It is therefore important that January 23 of every year be commemorated as the First Philippine Republic Day to remind us of our brave forebears and of our fight for freedom and independence, as well as of our people's capacity to endure. Thus today, I filed Senate Bill number 1664, in addition to what Senator Ejercito has already, Senator Chis Escudero has already been hearing the other bills, to create the First Philippine Republic Day Act to join, and I urge all my colleagues to join in recognizing the significance of this day to our country. Mr. President, Region 3 Senator Joel Villanueva would like to be co-sponsor of this measure. He authored it, and so, yes, and I congratulate you. Yeah, well, I think that would be for the bill itself, but for endorsing the privilege speech, I would be honored and privileged for your endorsements. Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is a resolution.
Mr. President,
Senator Villanueva.
First of all, let me congratulate, commend, and associate myself to the speech and statements made by our distinguished colleague from Zambales. This morning, Mr. President, I was in Malolos, Bulacan to celebrate the 119th year anniversary ng pagdedeklara ng unang republika doon po sa Malolos, Bulacan noong pong 1899. At naniniwala po ako, Ginoong Pangulo, na ginugunita po natin ito hindi lamang para alalahanin ang mga pangyayaring naganap noong mga nakaraang panahon, kung hindi dahil bahagi ito ng ating kasaysayan, at hindi lamang dahil nakasulat ito sa libro, kung hindi dahil naghahanap din po tayo ng tamang direksyon sa pwedeng tahakin para makarating ang ating mga pangarap bilang mga Pilipino, bilang isang bansa. This morning, Mr. President, kasama po natin doon ang mga taga Panay Island, taga Mindanao, taga Cavite, at tunay po, Mr. President, na ito hindi selebrasyon lamang ng dakilang lalawigan ng Bulacan, kung hindi selebrasyon po ito ng buong bayan. Maikli o short-lived lang po ang unang Republika ng Pilipinas mula Enero 23, 1899 hanggang Marso 23, 1901. Pero nagmarka po ito sa ating kasaysayan. Nag-iwan rin po ito sa atin ng isang dokumento na nagsilbing pundasyon at ilaw ng ating demokrasya. Walang iba kundi ang konstitusyon ng Malolos na nagbigay daan sa unang republikanong konstitusyon sa buong kontinente ng Asya. Tayo po, Ginoong Pangulo, ay isa sa mga principal sponsor na nagsusulong nito sa Senado. Doon po kanina sa diskusyon namin sa Malolos, Bulacan, hinihiling po nila na maging non-working holiday ito. Ngunit alam ko po at batid ng inyong lingkod na napakadami na po nating non-working holiday, Ginoong Pangulo. Kaya siguro it's about time, at sususugan ko po yung binanggit ni Senator Escudero nung nakaraan, na i-rationalize natin ang ating mga non-working holidays, at maaari siguro tayong gumawa ng isang panukalang batas na kung saan mapuproteksyonan din natin, lalong-lalo na ang ating mga negosyante na umaaray na din sa dami ng mga non-working holidays. Muli, Ginoong Pangulo, and this is also an appeal to my colleagues, considering that today is the 23rd of January. We are all celebrating the First Republic, and the Committee on Education, headed by Senator Escudero, already reported out this particular measure. I hope and pray, Mr. President, that we'll be able to do something today as we celebrate the First Republic of this nation. Thank you.
Senator Escudero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for the record, we reported out committee report via committee report number 82. This particular measure that was referred to the committee again via the authorship of Senators Binay and Gordon. Hopefully, in coordination with both the minority and the majority leader, we can approve this within this week, tomorrow, yes, as committed to by the distinguished majority floor leader. Tomorrow, bukas na lang. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
With that manifestation, Mr. President, I don't think it will be necessary to refer the privileged speech of Senator Gordon, because we have already promised that the sponsors and the authors that we will be scheduling this tomorrow for interpolation and possible passage on second reading, Mr. President. So with that, I move to transfer from calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. Senate Bill 1653 under Committee Report 231.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to consider Senate Bill 1653 under Committee Report 231.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act institutionalizing reforms in the procurement by distribution, utilities, and other distribution entities of supply for the captive market.
To sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chair of the Committee on Energy, Senator Win Gatchalian, be recognized.
Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Gandang hapon po, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon to you all. As the new year starts, it is my privilege to sponsor on the floor one bill, 1 year in the making, the Electricity Procurement Act of 2018, another measure that will lead to consumer savings for the Filipino people. The largest component of our electricity bill is the generation charge, which accounts for almost half of it. For the longest time, this charge was a product of negotiated contracts between distribution utilities and generation companies. However, no one except the two parties know what goes on during the negotiation, whether the price arrived at is indeed the least cost price available, or whether the price has hidden cost which the consumer is not aware of. The lack of transparency during the negotiation process also gave rise to allegations of sweetheart deals between distribution utilities that are contracted with affiliated generation companies, and raised concerns about how the price of these contracts unduly favored the generation companies at the expense of the consumers. Recognizing these inherent problems of negotiated contracts, the Department of Energy issued a policy requiring a competitive selection process for distribution utilities to procure power. Following this, the Energy Regulatory Commission, or the ERC, allowed utilities to choose their preferred mode of competitive selection process. Yet, this has resulted in another set of difficulties. For one, while large distribution utilities such as Meralco can acquire better contract terms, smaller ones, such as the electric cooperatives, have an inherent disadvantage. Owing to their limited demand for electricity and lack of resources to adequately review contracts given by the generators, electric cooperatives end up entering into unfavorable contracts, which result to higher electricity prices and lower quality of service for their member consumers. Furthermore, the lack of uniformity in the competitive selection process of distribution utilities has served as a barrier to entry for new generators. These new players are hindered from participating because of their lack of knowledge on the timing and the requirements for participating in the process. The committee has encountered a company with a 1,000 megawatt power plant with a price of 3.2 pesos per kilowatt hour, whose first statement to us was, yes, we want to participate, but where are the competitive selection processes? All these challenges have limited competition in the power supply contracting, resulting in higher power prices. These prices are all passed on to the consumers. In the first half of 2017 alone, approximately 370 billion pesos worth of electricity was paid by the Filipinos. Mr. President, Senate Bill number 1653 under Committee Report 231 presents a solution to these problems. This bill proposes a competitive selection process which is uniform across distribution utilities. To put it simply, Mr. President, may isang sistema at proseso para sa lahat ng distribution utilities at generation companies para magbenta at bumili ng supply ng kuryente. Ang sistemang ito, maglalaban-laban ang mga generators na magpababaan ng presyo upang makakuha sila ng kontrata ng isang distribution utility. Our internal estimates show that 30 centavos per kilowatt hour can be saved with an effective competitive selection process. This translates to a 60 peso savings to a 200 kilowatt hour household, equivalent to 2 kilograms of rice. This will result to economy-wide savings of 13 billion pesos. The competitive selection process envisioned in the bill will provide an avenue to discover the real cost of electricity in order to get the lowest price for the benefit of the consumers. First, it will provide a maximum reserve price to be determined by ERC. Any bid higher than this reserve price will not be accepted. Second, it will require all bids to reflect a price per kilowatt hour inclusive of all costs that will be passed on to consumers. This way, consumers are protected from fluctuating pass-on charges, such as foreign exchange and fuel costs. To address the problem of lack of uniformity in existing competitive selection process, the bill streamlines the procedure, which includes the qualification of bidders, the actual bidding, and the award of contract, and mandates that all this will be facilitated by a third-party auctioneer. This auctioneer shall initially be the market operator, who currently handles the electricity spot market of the country through an electronic platform. The choice of market operator as the initial third-party auctioneer is apt because the actual bidding will be done through an electronic network-based platform. It should be noted, however, that the volume of demand being procured and the frequency of the competitive selection process will be determined by the distribution utility as stated in its power supply procurement plan. This plan will ensure that utilities are able to properly forecast their demand to precisely determine how much supply to procure in the future. Mr. President, to further simplify the process and to even the playing field for distribution utilities and generation companies, standardized contracts, forms, and documents shall be used. With standardized power supply contracts, ibig sabihin, yung maliliit na mga kooperatiba ay ngayon protektado na sa mga mapagsamantalang kontrata na inihahain sa kanila ng iba pang mga generation companies. This bill will also usher in a regime change insofar as the role of ERC is concerned. For all contracts that go through the competitive selection process, the role of ERC will now be limited to reviewing whether or not the requirements and procedures have been complied with. This way, utilities and the generators no longer have to wait for years before ERC approves with finality the respective contracts. Nevertheless, ERC's rate-making power will still be called upon under exemplary circumstances which necessitates negotiated contracts. These exemplary circumstances include the occurrence of fortuitous and force majeure events or a failed bidding. Still, the bill indicates a maximum number of days for ERC to decide on these contracts under pain of penalty. Also, to ensure the speedy implementation of the measure and the protection of the entire process, administrative and criminal offenses and penalties are stipulated. Lastly, Mr. President, we started by saying that this measure is for the Filipino consumers. As such, consumer representation is mandated in every stage of the competitive selection process. Additionally, an electronic portal serving as a primary source of information on the competitive selection process will be open to the public. This will enhance transparency to an ever greater extent. Overall, Mr. President, this is a revolutionary bill that will remove the veil of secrecy that has for so long covered power supply contracting, a veil that should not have been there in the first place because it is the consumers who have been paying for every single centavo of what has been contracted. Ultimately, we hope to produce savings for the Filipino household as we move one step closer to achieving the 3S goals of the Senate Committee on Energy: energy stability, sustainability, and the most importantly, consumer savings. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Mr. President, to give time to the senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1653 under Committee Report 231.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders House Bill 1926 under Committee Report 215.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
I move to consider House Bill 1926 under Committee Report 215.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Maybe ask Secretary to read the title of the measure, Mr. President.
An act creating a barangay to be known as Barangay Poblacion 2 in the municipality of Villanueva, province of Misamis Oriental.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Local Government, Senator Sani Angara, be recognized.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, we rise today to sponsor House Bill 1926, which aims to complete the creation of Barangay Poblacion 2 in the municipality of Villanueva in the province of Misamis Oriental. Barangay Poblacion 2 was created in 2006 via a local government unit ordinance. The measure we are sponsoring today aims to establish that this barangay is entitled to receive its fair share of Internal Revenue Allotment, or IRA. This in return not only lifts the burden from its mother LGU but also empowers this barangay in the process. Ayon po sa batas, maaring tumayo bilang isang barangay ang isang nasasakupang lugar na panlalawigang munisipalidad kung ito ay may residente na aabot o hihigit sa 2,000. Naayon ang Barangay Poblacion 2 sa pamantayan na ito base sa Census of Population noong August 1, 2015, aabot sa 2,355 ang nakatira sa barangay na yon na may laking higit kumulang na 83.2 na hektarya or hectares. Ngunit sa kasalukuyan, walang anumang natatanggap na Internal Revenue Allotment share ang Barangay Poblacion 2 kahit pa nasa batas ang pagkakalaon ng pondo para sa mga barangay. Dahil po riyan, hindi nito magawang tumayo sa sariling kakayahan. Hindi sagarang matulungan ng mga opisyal ng barangay ang kanilang mga residente at hindi rin naniniwala at hindi rin nila magawang iangat ang kanilang maliit na barangay. Sakaling may pasa at may sa batas ang aming panukala, katumbas ito ng pagbibigay sa Barangay Poblacion 2 ng karapatang matanggap ang alokasyon na mula sa pambansang gobyerno na nauukol sa kanila. Tuluyan nang magagampanan ng mga opisyal nito ang kanilang mandato na pagsilbihan ng kanilang mamamayan. Sa tuwing may gulo sa isang lugar, Mr. President, ang unang takbuhan ng tao para humingi ng tulong ay ang barangay. Kapag tinulungan po natin ang barangay, halos natulungan na rin po natin ang mamamayan. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Mr. President, before I move to suspend the consideration of the measure, may I ask a question to the Chairman of the Committee on Local Government, Mr. President?
I will gladly answer to the best of my ability, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President. Cannot the House of Representatives pass this without the Senate, Mr. President?
I think only the Constitution is what they think they can pass without the Senate, Mr. President. I've never heard any congressman say they can pass legislation without the Senate, but I've heard a few congressmen say they think they can amend the Constitution without the Senate, Mr. President.
So therefore, this local bill cannot be passed without the concurrence of the Senate.
Absolutely, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. To give time to the other senators to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of House Bill 1926 under Committee Report 215.
Any objection? Any objection to the participation of the Senate? Hearing none, we suspend consideration of the measure.
Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders House Bill 5367 under Committee Report 216.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, I move to consider House Bill 5367 under Committee Report 216.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
An act reapportioning the 6th and 7th legislative districts in the province of Cavite to create an additional legislative district to be known as the 8th legislative district of the province of Cavite.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, again, the Chairman of the Committee on Local Government, Senator Sani Angara, be recognized.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, distinguished Majority Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear colleagues. Mr. President, the measure we are sponsoring today seeks to reapportion certain legislative districts in Cavite province so that in effect the city of General Trias will comprise its own legislative district. Minabandato mismo ng ating saligang batas na dapat may isang kinatawan sa bawat lungsod na may populasyong hindi bababa sa 250,000. Ayon sa 2015 National Census, higit sa 314,000 ang nakatira ngayon sa General Trias. Tinataya na ang populasyon na ito ay aabot sa halos 350,000 sa 2017, sa pagtapos ng 2017. Malinaw na sumasang-ayon ang General Trias sa pamantayan ng saligang batas para magkaroon ng sariling kinatawan sa Kamara. But our measure is about more than giving General Trias a greater say in its future by making its own legislative district. It's also about deepening democracy by enhancing the ratio of representation afforded to the LGUs in the 6th District. The Constitution states that legislative districts should be apportioned among the provinces, cities, and the Metropolitan Manila area in accordance with the number of their respective inhabitants and on the basis of a uniform and progressive ratio. In a 2010 blog post, the noted constitutionalist Father Joaquin Bernas wrote that this provision is the Equal Protection Clause of the Bill of Rights, made specific for the districts. He explained that this phrase was borrowed from American constitutional law, while American jurisprudence affirms that the fundamental principle of representative government is one of equal representation for equal numbers of people, and that legislative seats must be apportioned on a population basis. According to Father Bernas, the issue can be summarized simply: sovereignty is in the population. Aside from General Trias, the city of Trece Martires and the municipalities of Tanza and Amadeo currently comprise the 6th District. As of the 2015 census, with 734,000 residents, the 6th District is the 10th most populous in the country. Kapag naisabatas ang panukalang ito, mag-isa na po ang General Trias bilang ika-6 na distrito ng Cavite. Ang ika-7 distrito ay bubuin ng lungsod ng Trece Martires at ng munisipyo ng Tanza, Amadeo at Indang. Mr. President, General Trias has become among the fast-rising centers of growth in the greater Metro Manila area. Many who work in Manila have chosen it as their home with its proliferation of housing developments. It's just one reason why it's become one of the populous cities in the country. With such a population, it's high time that it be made into its own legislative district. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, to give time to the other members to study the proposed measure, I move to suspend consideration of House Bill 5367 under Committee Report 216.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1270 under Committee Report 212.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on the National Bible Day. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we're still in the period of interpolation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Senator Manny Pacquiao, and to interpolate the minority leader, Senator Frank Rilon.
To sponsor, Senator Manny Pacquiao is recognized, and for purposes of interpolation, Senator Drilon.
Yung sports sa matagal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor yield the floor for a few minutes on some clarificatory question? We have no basic objection to the passage of this bill, but we would like to place on the record certain policy issues which this chamber may wish to consider before the approval of this bill, and it is in that regard that may I ask the gentleman if he is yielding the floor for some questions.
It's an honor, Mr. President.
First question, Mr. President, on the basis of the transcript or on the basis of our previous debate on this, and on the basis of the manifestation of Senator Villanueva earlier on the floor, there was a concern on the number of holidays that we have in our country. So the first question is, can the gentleman sponsor spread into the record the number of holidays, regular and special, that we have today in our country?
Mr. President, we have 12 regular holidays and 12 and special non-working days.
Sorry, 12 regular holidays and how many special holidays, sir?
Published is 9, pero dadagdagan ng Immaculate Super.
10, Mr. President.
10 special holidays.
Special, yes, Mr. President.
May we know, for the record, first, what are the regular holidays, just for the record?
January 1 is New Year's Day. March 29 is Monday, Thursday. March 30, Good Friday. April 9, Araw ng Kagitingan. May 1, Tuesday, Labor Day. June 12, Independence Day. August 27, National Heroes Day. November 30, Bonifacio Day. December 25, Christmas Day. And December 30, Rizal Day. Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, Mr. President.
Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha.
Eid
That
al-Adha.
makes it 12.
12,
12
Mr.
regular
President.
holidays.
Yes, Mr.
All right.
President.
And there are how many special non-working holidays, for the record, Mr. President?
8, Mr. President, 9 including the Immaculate Conception, Mr. President.
My count, Mr. President, is that we have 4 special non-working holidays. This is the Dinoy Aquino Day on August 21, the All Saints Day on November 1, the usually declared the last day of the year, December 31, Immaculate Conception, December 8. That's 4. The good sponsor mentioned 8. What are the others? What are the others holidays for the record, sir?
This is for 2018, Mr. President, declared by the President. Holidays.
Okay, what are, so I mentioned 4 special non-working holidays by law. What are those which are declared by the President for 2018, for the record?
February 16, Chinese New Year Day.
I'm sorry, the Chinese New Year?
Yes.
Okay, and then?
It's People Power Revolution.
February 25.
February 25.
All right.
Black Saturday, March 31. Ninoy Aquino Day, August 21.
No, the Ninoy Aquino Day is by law, not by presidential proclamation. You have so far enumerated 3, EDSA Revolution, Chinese New Year, Black Saturday.
It's part, including the declaration of the President, Mr. President, signed by the President, this Ninoy Aquino Day. Also included to the declaration about President, and also All Saints Day, that's November 1, and last day of the year, December 31.
Okay.
Additional special non-working days, November 2 and December 24, Mr. President.
Anyway.
And Immaculate Conception, Mr. President, December 8.
For the record, how, in terms of the daily workers, in terms of how the daily workers' pay are treated, what's the difference between a regular and a special holiday, just for the record?
The difference of regular holiday, Mr. President, is employers would have to pay twice the daily rate plus the COLA of the employees, Mr. President. And a special non-working holiday, the employers would have to pay 30% premium,
All right.
Mr. President.
In case of, if case no work is done on a regular holiday, the daily paid worker would be paid his regular pay. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, Mr. President.
But in case of a special non-working holiday, the daily paid worker will not get any pay. Is that correct,
Yes,
sir?
Mr. President.
All right, for the record. All right, now, having spread that on the record, may we know what is the intention of the good sponsor on this national, on this National Bible Day? Is it a regular non-working holiday or a special non-working holiday, or is it a special working day?
Mr. President, I propose that special non-working holiday, Mr. President.
It is a special non-working holiday.
Correct, Mr. President.
Now, may we invite the attention of the good sponsor that in the co-sponsorship speech of Senator Escudero, the proposal is that the National Bible Day will be declared as a special working holiday. And the committee report of the Committee on Education, Arts, and Culture is entitled An Act Declaring the Last Monday of January as National Bible Day and pronounce the same as special working holiday and every year thereafter. So which is which now, Mr. President? There appears to be a difference in the sponsorship speech of the good sponsor and that of Senator Escudero, and the committee report itself is differently presented, or the title is different from what the good sponsor is asserting at this point. Which is which, Mr. President?
Mr. President, we are willing to consider the perspectives of our distinguished colleagues. The bottom line is that we want to highlight the importance of the Bible, Mr. President, and our spiritual foundation as Christians, Mr. President, because we know that in our country, majority is Christian.
Mr. President, the intention of this representation at this point is not material. We are just trying to figure out what is the intention of the good sponsor, because the committee report is different from the sponsorship speech of the good sponsor and different from the sponsorship speech of Senator Escudero. What is the intention of the sponsor insofar as the National Bible Day is concerned?
Mr. President, we want to propose a special non-working holiday, Mr. President. That's the
a special non-working holiday. So the committee report will be amended at the appropriate time, Mr. President, because the committee report, let me read it. It says on page 1, line 7, replace the word national with special working before the word holiday. Delete the entire section 4 and the number the succeeding sections accordingly. And number 3, in the title, replace the word regular with special working. So the good sponsor now is saying that the committee report will not be followed or presented because the committee report says otherwise.
It will be amended, Mr. President, in the committee At the proper time, Mr. President.
It will be amended at the proper time. And so that the committee will present a committee amendment which will say that the National Bible Day will be a non-working special holiday.
Correct, Mr. President.
Now, hindi po ba nakakaawa yung mga manggagawa natin na binabayaran ng pang-arawan? Our daily paid workers, when we declare a certain day as a special non-working holiday, it means that they do not earn anything for that day. On the other hand, if we say a special holiday with pay, then the employer will be hit because he will have to pay the daily wage even if the day is not productive. Now, has the good sponsor, who will amend the committee report later, considered the effect of this special non-working holiday on our daily paid workers na wala pong kikitain, walang sahod kung gagawin nating special non-working holiday?
We will study, Mr. President, the point raised by the gentleman from Iloilo, Mr. President.
So that you will consider these views when you review the committee report.
Correct, Mr. President.
And it is possible that the committee report will retain the treatment of National Bible Day simply as a special working holiday as indicated in committee report number 212.
We consider that position, Mr. President, but my propose is to have a special non-working holiday, Mr. President.
Well, I was just making that statement because I thought that you will consider the plight of the ordinary daily paid worker who will not get paid in a special non-working holiday. But I leave it to the sponsor and to the chamber to consider this provision or this bill, particularly on whether or not it is a special non-working holiday in which the workers, daily paid workers, will lose a day's pay, or we can commemorate the National Bible Day by just making it a special working holiday as indicated by the committee report unanimously approved by all the members of the Committee on Education. With that, we submit and we are no longer have any questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, and just to explain, in a Bible holiday, we were going to we're going to organize all over the Philippines to have commemorate the Bible Day, Bible holiday, and have activities like Bible reading in school or in the government. That's our purpose, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I move that we close the period of interpolation on Senate Bill 1270, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? So hearing none, we will now close the period for interpolation of this measure.
Mr. President, to give time to the sponsor to study the proposed amendments, we might not be able to take it up today. So I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1270, and when we reschedule, we hopefully will be able to come up with the proposed amendments that the sponsor will take up, Mr. President.
Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. Mr. President, I move to suspend the session for a few minutes and maybe ask some, or the members of the Senate, those who are available to join us in the lounge for a very important question that Senator Dick Gordon wants to take up, Mr. President.
So for all senators caucus, we are suspending the session for a few minutes.
Akin yung letter, yung papel.
Hindi ko na i-avail yung na-avail ko yung immaculate conception. I-avail ko ito. Meron kang choice. Yung sinasabi ko nga, ipasa muna natin yung rationalization. Eh kaso pinasa, inuna ipasa yung immaculate. Pinili. Kung sabihin ng employee, yeah, I will not choose the Muslim holiday, I will choose the Christian holiday. Pero sasabihin ng employee,
Val, file doon letter. File doon letter. Gusto ko makuha yung date ng kanyang detention, first date. September 2017. Tama yan. Oo. Oo. Oo.
Tapos, nag-sponsorship ni si Manny. Ang problema yun, iba doon sa pagkakita. Kasi He's
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1620 under Committee Report 161.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on the abolition of the road board. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we're in the period of interpolation. So may we recognize the Chairman of the Committee on Public Works, Senator Manny Pacquiao, and to interpolate the Minority Leader, Senator Frank Rilon.
The sponsors, Senator Manny Pacquiao and the Minority Leader, are both recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for the record, I have no assistant minority leader, so I do all the interpellation. Mr. President, will the gentleman yield to a few questions?
It's an honor, Mr. President, for my continuing education, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I wish to manifest to record that this representation has no objection to the abolition of the Road Users Board. Road Users Board. We have no objection to that. We believe that given the decision of the Supreme Court subsequent to the passage of this law, there are really questions on whether or not the constitutionality of the road board can be sustained, and principally because, in effect, there is post-enactment identification of projects. As you will recall, Mr. President, being a lawyer, in the case of Belgica versus Ochoa, the Supreme Court ruled that the PDAF was unconstitutional. And the basis for the unconstitutionality of the PDAF system, according to the Supreme Court, was that the legislators participated in post-enactment identification of projects, meaning that there is a lump sum allocation, the legislators would identify the project, and the project would be accordingly funded from the lump sum appropriation. Now, would the sponsor agree that the present system in the road board would be akin to and similar to that situation identified by the Supreme Court as an unconstitutional post-enactment identification, except that instead of the legislator, it is the board? Would the sponsor agree with that, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes. So that that's additional rationale, or that in fact that is a principal reason for the abolition of the road board, because in the road board it is very clear that there is the tax, the motor vehicles, the motor vehicles users charge would go to a special fund, and from this special fund or lump sum fund, those who would want street lights or street markings or air pollution would have to go, air pollution mitigation, would go to the road board, identify the project, and ask for funding. Now, that is precisely what the Supreme Court said was unconstitutional. I would repeat, it confers a post-enactment identification authority to the congressmen and the senators, and in this particular case, to the road board. Now, so we have no objection to the abolition of the road board. But what we have noted, Mr. President, is that this power of the road board is transferred to the Secretary of Public Works and the Secretary of Transportation. So pareho lang po. But just instead of the road board, ibinigay sa Secretary. The same powers. Instead of going to the road board, now you have to go to the Secretary and plead with the Secretary that a certain project should be funded out of this lump sum road board. Isn't that also the same as the prohibition that the Supreme Court manifested or ruled in the case of Belhica versus Ochoa?
Possible, Mr. President.
Yes, it is not only possible, but that is exactly what the Supreme Court prohibited, because it's exactly the same setup. Lump sum, and the legislators and the congressmen and the senators would identify the project. The project is funded out of that lump sum. Here, the motor vehicles users fund would be a lump sum, and the project is identified, and the road board, or in this particular case, the Secretary of the Department of Public Highways would identify the project. It is our submission that that is exactly what the Supreme Court prohibited and declared as unconstitutional in the case of Belhica versus Ochoa. And therefore, my proposal is that we should abolish, we maintain the road users tax and collect.
Yes, Mr. President,
but we do not, we put it and we assign it and we assign the usage in the General Appropriations Act, not leave it to the Secretary of the Department of Public Works.
Yes, Mr. President, I have no objection with that. I agree with that. But that's a separate bill, Mr. President.
I'm sorry?
We can file a separate bill for that.
No. This is...
Mr. President, in the Constitution, Article 6, Section 29, paragraph 3 states, all money collected on any tax levied for a special purpose shall be treated as a special fund and paid out for such purpose only. If the purpose for which a special fund was created has been fulfilled or abandoned, the balance, if any, shall be transferred to the general funds of the government.
Well, precisely, the Constitution vests into Congress the power to appropriate for a specific project. That is why we have the General Appropriations Act. That is why the Supreme Court said the PDAF system is unconstitutional, because it is not Congress who is identifying the project, but it is the congressman or the senator. Following that doctrine, the MVUC, or the special fund, should be allocated and should be appropriated by Congress in the General Appropriations Act, including the projects. Because, Mr. President, in the budget, you have a budget for road maintenance fund, which passes through Congress. And Senator Lacson scrutinizes this maintenance fund because that is the role of the Congress. If we maintain the present system of the MBUC, that power to scrutinize a particular project is not with the Senate, it is not with Congress, because that is now exercised by the Road Board or the Secretary of Public Works and Highways. That is why I am one with the sponsor that we should abolish the Road Board. But we should not substitute the Road Board with the Secretary of Public Works and Highways or the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. We should not, because there is no change in the system. You only change the body exercising post-enactment identification. That is our point, because we will already say on record that we will propose an amendment at the appropriate time that it should be Congress who should appropriate on the specific projects as read out by the good sponsor.
That's
not
correct.
the road board, not the Secretary of Public Works and Highways. Otherwise, we might as well abolish the Senate as some legislators would want.
That's correct, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm amenable of the wisdom of the good gentleman, Mr. President. I have no problem with that as long as the road board will abolish.
The road board will be abolished, and the powers of the road board should go back to Congress, not to the Secretary of Public Works or Secretary of Transportation.
That's not a problem, Mr. President.
That's in order. That will be accepted at the appropriate time as an amendment. Is that
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you. Now, the other issue that I want to put on the record and present to the sponsor is the creation of a special trust account. Okay. The sponsor may be aware that under PD 1177, a one-fund concept as a concept of budgeting is being encouraged. What does this mean? It means that all revenues must accrue to a general fund from which the allocation will be and the appropriation will be made. It is because of this concept of one fund or one fund concept that we have passed a law which precisely allocates the revenues to specific activities, but no special fund is created. And we are talking about the use of the funds generated by the sin taxes that we imposed. Under the existing law, the sums collected by virtue of the law that we passed in the last Congress is allocated to our health sector in certain percentages. But there is no general fund to talk about. In other words, when the General Appropriations Act is enacted, that allocation and division is followed. For example, 80% would go to PhilHealth, X% would go to hospital equipment, etc. So that there is no special fund. Now, we can maintain the percentages that the law allows. As, for example, we can have 55% to be allotted and placed for maintenance of national road or maintenance of local roads, or etc. But do not create anymore a special fund because the concept of one fund is enshrined in our laws today. So without changing the percentages, may we know if the sponsor is agreeable to removing the one fund concept, which is contrary to existing policies. But we maintain the same percentages.
Yes, Mr. President, and I have no problem with that, Mr. President. And
yes.
And also, I'm proposing to allocate the funds instead of a national road. Maybe we can put 50% to a local road or submit to the approval of the Congress.
Yes.
But that's my suggestion. So we know that the problem, the local level, there's a lot of a problem in.
No, it will be, the project will be executed by the DPWH, but what will be repaired or maintained would be a local road.
Yes, Mr. President.
So that in other words, we do not allow, because you correctly, the sponsor is concerned about malpractices in the local level, and since these are national funds, but dedicated to the maintenance of local roads, we can let the DPWH continue to execute it, not the local. Is that okay with the good sponsor?
I have no problem with that, Mr. President.
Now, by the way, in the third paragraph of Section 1, the allocation of exceeds 100%. Let me read it. The third paragraph of Section 1 of the proposed measure allocates 55% to a special road support fund, which is the national road, 35% to the local road fund. This already is 90%. And then we add 7.5% to the special road safety fund and another 7.5% to the special vehicle pollution control fund. That totals 105, Mr. President. Maybe
Just typographical error,
Okay.
Mr. President.
So at the appropriate time, we will correct this.
Yes, Mr. President.
On those two principles that, because the two principles that we put on the record and which the sponsor agreed are reasonable and correct, and has agreed to the amendment at the appropriate time, we have no more questions on this bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to thank the gentleman from Iloilo for the points that he has raised during the interpolation.
So just to put on the record, what we have agreed with the sponsor is that, number one, we will continue to collect the motor vehicles users charge.
Yes, Mr. President. Correct.
Second, we will continue with the earmarking, i.e. 55% for the maintenance of the secondary roads. I'm sorry, of the national and secondary roads, 5% for traffic lights, 5% for air pollution, 35% on local roads, or is the sponsor increasing this to 50% for local roads?
We'll study that matter, Mr. President, but I'm thinking to increase the percentage for the local roads, Mr. President.
To how much?
I think 50%, Mr. President.
Well, because if it's 50%, lalagpas po sa 100%. Anyway.
We will adjust the other.
All right. Okay. But and anyway, so the third agreement that we have had is that all monies collected under this law should go to the general fund of the National Treasury, which Congress will now appropriate, and including identification of projects. With those agreements, Mr. President, as we said, we reiterate at the appropriate period of amendment, we will introduce these amendments as agreed now, and we have no more questions on this period, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is one more interpellation on the road board, but the senator has expressed this reservation to interpellate next week, Monday. So Senator J.B. Ercito will interpellate. In the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1620, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, we suspend the consideration of the said measure.
Move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1531 under Committee Report 141.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure on Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act of 2017. And the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of interpellation. So may we recognize the sponsor, Chairman of the Committee on Energy, Senator Gatchalian, and to interpellate the workhorse of the minority, Mr. President, the minority leader, Senator Pratrilon.
The sponsor, Senator Gatchalian, is recognized, and for purposes of interpellation, the minority leader.
One minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Huwag mo naman tabihan yung committee report mo sa
Sipag eh. Masipag.
Sige.
Which is good.
Ha?
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Yeah. Just for the record, the bill under consideration is Senate Bill number 1623. Reduce, no? I'm sorry.
No, that's it. 1531. The
1531.
minority leader was taking up something during the break.
Okay. yes.
Something else, Mr. President.
Okay. So we are talking about Senate Bill 1531 under Committee Report 141.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the gentleman has this representation has the floor because this is a continuation of the period of interpellation. Our principal concern, Mr. President, is the tax incentive granted to companies as a result of installation of energy efficient machineries. Now, fiscal incentives are granted to these companies under the Board of Investments, under the BOI law. So the first question is, who are entitled to the benefits under the Omnibus Investment Code? Kindly walk us through the process of qualifying for incentives under the Omnibus Incentive Code, because the bill grants fiscal incentives to those who will join the program on energy conservation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just to backtrack a bit, after the approval of the TRAIN, the tax reform, this representation took note of the new tax policy of this new administration, meaning that VAT exemptions, zero VAT rating will not be given out to any industries anymore, and it will be rationalized in the next few years as we discuss more tax reforms in this August hall, Mr. President. And Mr. President, so to jumpstart the energy efficiency and conservation programs that is envisioned by the Department of Energy, they have to give out some form of incentive, because to date, Mr. President, energy efficiency and conservation technologies are still quite expensive. No? I'll give you a very specific example, Mr. President. An LED light, light bulbs, LED light bulbs, Mr. President, will still cost about 10 times more compared to incandescent lights or CFL lights, Mr. President. So mas mahal pa rin ho siya, no, to date. Although in the long run, no, when you replace your CFL light bulbs with LED, it will produce savings that will help you recover that investment. No? But the cash upfront, no, for example, po, you will replace your machineries, light bulbs today, no? You have to shell out bigger cash amounts in order to enjoy savings in the next few years. So the rationale here, Mr. President, is to lower down the acquisition cost by giving out incentives, Mr. President. And let me just flash the incentives available under the Omnibus Investment Code, Mr. President. Slide 23. These are the incentives available right now, no?
Yes.
Under the Omnibus Investment Code, which we did not touch even under the new tax regime.
Yes, all right. Hold on to that chart there. The incentives under the Omnibus Investment Code, number one, income tax holiday. An enterprise purchases for his shopping mall a more energy efficient escalator. All right? Now, will that enterprise now enjoy an income tax holiday?
Mr. President, what we did here is we delegated the qualifications to the Board of Investments.
I think, as a concept, it is not correct. It is not correct that we grant an income tax holiday to purchase a more energy-efficient equipment. We may grant incentives like additional deduction so that the income tax, the taxes on the income in general can be lower as a result of an additional deduction, but to grant incentives under the Omnibus Investment Code, including, which would include an income tax holiday, I think is simply not correct. Because then, firstly, conceptually, it is not correct. Number two, that will give a wide discretion to the bureaucrat in granting the incentive. So, of course, this is a matter that I would strongly suggest should be examined carefully. I will repeat, we have no disagreement with the purpose of the law, to grant incentives to encourage energy efficiency by acquisition of energy efficient equipment, for example. But we should provide incentive for that particular acquisition, not an income tax holiday, for example, under the Omnibus Investments Code. You know, for example, under the Labor Code, there are trainees or training modules wherein the salary, which is a deduction, an ordinary deduction from income taxes, would be doubled in order to encourage training in that particular area. The same concept can be followed. If the escalator costs, say, 100,000 pesos, and the depreciation is for 5 years, you can have a shorter depreciation period, in which case the deduction will be bigger. Or you can allow double the additional tax, the additional deduction from your gross income, doubling the cost, for example, of that energy-saving device. So the incentive would be specific to the program or to the equipment, not to the entire income of the company, because there is no sense. You buy an escalator, your income tax return, you enjoy an income tax holiday for 6 years because it's a pioneer status, because of the pioneer status. It simply does not wash, Mr. President.
Mr. President, let me just clarify the incentives that is being envisioned in the bill. Mr. President, those incentives flashed on the screen will not necessarily be given each one to the applicant. It really depends on what type of technology and what type of equipment are you applying for. For example, Mr. President, let's take that example with the energy efficient, for example, you're a shopping mall, you want to replace your escalators with a much more energy efficient escalators. However, the escalators will cost probably at this time probably about 2 to 3 times more, because of the technology being applied. However, that same escalator will probably also save you, in terms of electricity cost in the next 5 to 7 years. Mr. President, what the applicant can apply for here is duty exemption for importation. And let me just flash slide 28, Mr. President. When you apply for a duty exemption, you effectively lower down your acquisition cost because you don't have to pay any more duties and taxes, Mr. President. So effectively, you will now help the company and consequently incentivize the company to replace their old equipment with energy efficient equipment because it's because you lower down their acquisition cost, Mr. President. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the company will apply for tax holiday. They can only apply for that equipment, Mr. President.
Except, Mr. President, that benefit is available to the company. We have no problems of granting incentive to specific programs or purchase of specific equipment. That is a reasonable system. But to say that they can be registered under the BOI law, which opens up to a lot of incentives not necessarily related to the equipment purchase for energy conservation, I think to me, to this representation, that concept can lead to a lot of revenue losses. And number two, it creates so much discretion on the part of the bureaucrat that it can lead to unwarranted benefits. So that's all that we're putting on record, Mr. President. And we hope that this can be considered by the sponsor.
Yes, Mr. President.
In other words, change the concept of incentive from being simply they can avail of the benefits under the BOI law to a more specific equipment or program related or based incentive.
Mr. President, the reason why we delegated the incentive program of this bill to the BOI because there are different types of technologies as well as different types of scheme in terms of applying for energy efficiency and conservation technologies. Mr. President, let me just point out that the BOI in last year, 2017, we're already talking about giving incentives to energy efficiency projects, and they actually included energy efficient projects under the 2017 IPP. They're targeting to bring out the guidelines hopefully February of 2018. Mr. President, the schemes will depend on the project itself, and we are now delegating the giving of incentives to the BOI board. It really depends on the project and really depends also on the technology being applied for, Mr. President.
Well,
so, Mr. President, let me just give an example. The BOI comes up with different industries that they are giving incentives to, and the BOI actually is empowered to catalyze whatever industries that they think will be good for the next few years here in our country. So that process is being applied to also to energy efficiency and conservation programs, Mr. President. And Mr. President, what we really envision is to just align whatever incentives the BOI has already given to different industries to date, Mr. President.
Mr. President, in my experience, whenever whenever there are laws wherein the DTI and the DOF are involved, it is the most difficult piece of legislation that you can work on. Because whereas one hand, the DTI would grant and would push for incentives to enterprises, which is their mandate, On the other hand, the DOF, under their mandate, would protect government revenues, and therefore there is always a lacking of horns. There are a number of instances, and I can cite them, wherein the internal, the IRR, implementing rules and regulations, could not be implemented because, or crafted because of the difference of opinion between the DOF and the implementing agency. I am afraid that this would suffer the same fate, and for that reason, may we know and spread for the record, if the DOF has passed upon and has agreed to this kind of an incentive scheme for energy efficiency.
Yes, Mr. President. In fact, the original proposal in this bill is to grant tax exemptions. And that's why when we invited DOF there, obviously they were against giving tax exemptions precisely because of the tax reform that they are also proposing. That's why the only settlement that we agreed upon is to just be consistent, no? With whatever incentives the government has already given under the Omnibus Investment Code. Because the Omnibus Investment Code was not repealed, and certain industries, depending on the Board of Governors, are already enjoying this, various incentives, no, being given. So the concept here, Mr. President, is just to include, no, energy efficiency and conservation in the investment priority program of the government. And whatever the government deems fit to give, whatever incentives that the governors deem fit to give, then let the governors come up with that concept, Mr. President.
Right. Mr. President, I think we can settle this debate on this particular issue. May we request then the sponsor to request the Department of Finance that they have no basic objection to the grant of incentive as crafted in the present bill for and consider energy conservation as a preferred area of investment, a pioneer, or whether pioneer or not pioneer, just for the comfort, because we want to be responsible. We don't want to pass legislation which could in fact harm or which will be contrary to existing policies. So if it is in order, may we request that the good sponsor request the Department of Finance to submit a letter to the sponsor which will in substance say that they have no basic objection to this grant of tax incentive to this kind of an activity.
Yes. Mr. President, yes, Mr. President, we will also share the discussions during the committee hearing. Both the DOF and BOI were invited, so we will also share the transcript and the relevant discussions about these incentives. At the same time, we will also request in writing from the DOF and the DTI/BOI their opinion and confirmation to this proposal, Mr. President.
Mr. President, can we suspend at this point our interpellation and continue after, well, at least after the that letter that you requested is submitted to us, or when we have when are able to study the other aspects of the bill that we would want to
Mr. President, just to also manifest, we will again take a look at the incentive scheme being proposed here, and we will analyze whether this will go against the tax reform and the present tax regime that's being implemented right now, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, in the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1531 under Committee Report 141.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Pagod na ako eh. Hino pa akong nakatayo.
Hindi ko send ka. Andiyan yung BOI.
Not to run then. Not to run. Not to run then. Kaaway palagi yan ang BOI.
The There is one more in the agenda, Mr. President, for tonight, but we will move it for tomorrow because the workhorse of the minority has lost steam. So, in the meantime, Mr. President, with the permission of the Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, chaired by Senator Subiri, may I move to create the Subcommittee on Network Freedom Act to conduct hearings on Senate Bill 1643, authored by Senator Gatchalian. So move, Mr. President.
I was not able to hear your manifestation. What is the motion?
With the permission of the Committee on Trade, Mr. President, chaired by Senator Subiri, I move to create the Subcommittee on Network Freedom Act to conduct hearings on Senate Bill 1643, authored by Senator Gatchalian, which prohibits network-locked mobile devices, Mr. President. This manifestation will designate Senator Gatchalian as chair of the subcommittee.
So since that has been authorized by the committee chairman, so let it be noted.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I move to adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, January 24, 2018.
Is there any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, January 24, 2018.